Today is June 21st. It's 4:03 p.m. The Affordable Housing Subcommittee of the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development meeting has now commenced. This meeting is being held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and protect the public health. We ask all commissioners and guests to mute yourselves until called upon to speak. If you've dialed in to unmute, dial *6. Also, please announce who you are prior to speaking to identify yourself. This meeting is being recorded due to open meeting law. Attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call, not by using the chat function. So I'll take the roll call. Marianne Bierling.
I'm here.
Maggie Amato Tejas. I see you, Maggie.
Can you hear me? I
didn't
changed
hear you. Now I
laptops.
can.
'Cause I have a-
Okay. Jim Toffel.
Here.
We have our ex officio, Corin Manning.
Present.
Thank you. Marcos Ismael.
Here.
Awesome. Betty Viegas, I do not see. We have our regular attendees, David Wall.
Regular.
Joe Audino.
Hi.
Hi. Megan Headings.
Here.
Sally Schwen is not here. Jason Heisey also not here. I haven't seen them in a little bit. Also, I'd like, to acknowledge everyone else. Victoria is on the line with us. And I see a few others, Ann Krebs and Lena Porel. So let's go ahead and do the call to the audience. This is a time when any member of the public may address the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. Due to time constraints, the total time allocated for this is 15 minutes. Individuals are allowed 3 minutes each. We cannot discuss topics that are not on the agenda because of open meeting law, and any items that you bring up could be considered as an agenda item for a future meeting. So is there anyone with us today who would like to speak? Hi, yes, go ahead, Victoria.
Can you hear me? Okay, my efforts for making a case for the city have moved forward in educating myself fully on what it means to make a case and the process on how to do that. And I'm missing some data. So I've been trying to get to the point where I can afford to print, but it's over like $60 to print the PIT from TPCH, the P-CHIP poverty report, HAST, all the KED documents, and then they have the food systems report, and then I have Town Hall 113, 114, and 115. And then I have the ASU study that you guys did. So I can't afford to print that, and currently I'm looking at playing music on the street, and I'm not sure about the schedule and the ability to do that. Oh, sorry, that's my cat. But what I have done is I've written out the process of the case, and I don't know who to call currently to be able to know. And I don't know if you even know, or if anybody knows, how many affordable housing units we have, how many supportive housing units we have, how many transitional housing units we have. So I don't know if you have the correct data on all the different types of housing, knowing the difference between those housing and being able to compare that to your population. And then also I noticed that you have not streamlined a process or incentivized the ability to create affordable housing. It's still relying on a modeled system that is not very likely to meet the requirements and needs in the long run. Have you considered any creative alternative things that have been done in other countries, in other cities? And have you talked to those people about what they have done? And then have you considered that in your plan for affordable housing? And have you considered a plan to face the legislature, the senators, for the sake that we are one of 7 out of 51 states that do not regulate our rent? And do you know what it means entirely in all the factors for renting and what that looks like in data compared to your population, and how that lines up with those who are unhoused and on the streets? And are you aware of what your shelters are doing, and if they're only operating, helping certain people as nonprofits, and how they are franchising or disfranchising certain populations that there's no public education on how to participate, and there's no community, and there's no affordable community for those who are impoverished. So are you aware of the level of chaos on how that affects your crime rates and drugs and your city and devastation and completion? Be aware of that, because I will be presenting that in my case. All right, that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you, Victoria. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Yes.
Joe has his hand up.
Yeah, just real quick, I'll probably present this to the CHD as a whole, but you'll get the word on it first. There's good new paper from a couple weeks ago. It was from Mariana Mazzucato, the economist from London, and Leilani Farha, the former United Nations Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing. It's called The Right to Housing, a mission-oriented and human rights-based approach. I thought it was pretty good. I'll give you a link to it in the chat. And I had one quote from it that was a good little summary. The current housing system is fundamentally flawed, with houses treated as financial assets and governments reluctant to interfere with market dynamics. As the world continues its urbanization process, the housing challenge will only grow. A new approach is urgently needed, blending the human rights and mission-oriented policy frameworks reframes the housing crisis as a challenge that is both necessary and possible to solve. So if that's of interest to anybody, kind of a different approach to how we look at that, how we look at housing in general, I'll have that for you in chat in just a second. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. Is that it?
Yep, that was all. If anybody has any, questions or wants to talk about it, I'm pretty sure y'all have my email and stuff. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. All right. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak? Oh, weird. Victoria, your screen is glitching. I'm not sure if you have your hand up again or if it's a glitch. You're on mute.
It will do that when I click on a link, because it opens up a different window for a different browser. I apologize. I have
Hey, Jason Heisey's is on the meeting now too.
Jason Heisey has his hand up?
No, but he's an attendee.
Oh, okay, great. I don't see him on here. Maybe I'm. Huh. Okay. Sorry, I think I just had to expand my screen. Okay, great. Thank you for being here, Jason. Did you have something you wanted to share? No. Okay. Okay, so if there's no one else, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is the affordable housing inventory goal. Jim and Sarah.
Yeah, so Jim, if you want to kick it off, but I don't mind. I did create a little presentation to kind of go through affordable housing inventory. I know this is something you guys have all been talking about and getting to the point of coming up with some numbers, right? Units, etc. So Jim, do you have any kind of intro you would like to add to?
Yeah, just real quick. So this was something that we all talked about as a short-term goal was identifying a target at a certain point in time of how many affordable housing units we'd like to see in the city of Tucson. And it's just been an open point. We've had several conversations on it. So the question that I'm hoping we can get answered, maybe not today, but in the next couple of months is, what do we think is an adequate number of affordable housing units in Tucson over what time frame?
Cool. So I will go ahead and share my screen and give my presentation that I've sort of come up with. So just kind of nod if you can see my screen. Cool. All right. So this presentation is really just to kind of touch on what Jim just said, but kind of give you a insight into what we have, et cetera, that's like existing and kind of what we think we can do. So all of the existing housing data can be found at the map dashboard. We'll get a link out to you guys as well. I know it's been shared plenty of times. It's a little outdated, right? I mean, it was done a couple years back. So, but you know, it's pretty much as up to date, except for a few of the LIHTC projects that have been built in the last 2 years. So we have the Housing Choice Voucher Program, we have project-based vouchers, we have public housing units, and we also have the affordable housing. So that's sort of the snapshot. I didn't add them all up to know exactly the number, but this is sort of what we see across the county and region for affordable housing across different sort of methods of types of sort of subsidy. We also know that there's units that go out of affordability periods, right? In the LIHTC project specifically, affordability terms end. And so there's a spreadsheet you can access from HUD that sort of outlines what these projects are, and you can keep track of them year by year. So you know, the units that are going to be terming out are from 1983, 1994, 1995, and 1996. So ultimately, kind of what we are seeing happen as a trend is as units term out, we also build sort of around the same number of LIHTC units per year. So it's sort of a break even that we're seeing happen. Definitely sorting out how to work on keeping these units that end up terming out of affordability. How, you know, I think that's a strategy that we're always looking forward for ideas for, of what we can do to you know, get affordable people in to repurchase the units or incentivize the current owners to remain affordable. So that's definitely being discussed across the nation and something that we can keep following as well. But we are seeing it kind of break even based off of the number of LIHTC units we build. So just sort of thinking about the trends and what we've seen get built over the years and what can realistically get built. You know, these are just discussions with developers and other community partners. Ultimately, you know, we see on average, right, 2 9% LIHTC projects, 75 units each, hopefully 1 4% LIHTC per year at 200 units. And then if we can get 100 units of scattered projects, right, the small scale, Megan's making a face, but the small scale, you know, this is sort of our goal, thinking of if the best possible outcome, 440 units per year, right? Just best possible outcome of what could be developed. And then thinking that this is really where we're trying to place these types of units in the continuum of housing, supportive, affordable rental, and affordable home ownership. But I think the question then is, so you can create, let's say you create between 300 and 400 or 300 and 500 units, who do the units serve? Which is sort of the question that I have after you determine how many you can build realistically or theoretically. And so just making that connection, if we produce this many units, does it meet the need we have in our community, and does it replace what we're losing? And making sure that there's that connection as well. And kind of at the end of the day, more analysis I think is needed really to get at the crux of it. And so one thing that we know, and we've talked about in this group, but is also being talked about at the county level, is a housing needs assessment. These slides were sort of shown. We have the local housing solutions tool, which is free. I think I've shared that with this commission before. If you Google local housing solutions, housing needs assessment, it pops right up. You can type in Tucson and it really gives a data snapshot. And so that sort of is just like a free tool that exists. We're working through Plan Tucson right now. And part of Plan Tucson is coming up with goals around housing. And, I think that some of the data that gets sort of worked through that process of updating the general plan can help inform some of the housing need analysis that's happening simultaneously. And then the Pima County Regional Affordable Housing Commission was given a presentation a couple months back from county staff regarding their data dashboard that they're trying to prepare and set up a scope of work and complete within the next 12 months. So that will include a housing needs assessment and a target market analysis, and it'll be jurisdictional, et cetera. So Pima County's still working on this. This is all that they've really put out so far, but definitely encourage. I know we have a couple of subcommittee members who are now also on that Pima County Commission. So making sure that, we're kind of communicating back and forth, that we want this to remain collaborative. And if there's anything that comes from this subcommittee and the full commission, making sure that we get it back to them as well, as they kind of wrap up and get this kicked off, which they had sort of slated to start in July. So that's sort of what I put together, and just wanted to then open it up for discussion. If there's any discussion or thoughts that you all have, yeah, that's kind of what I did.
This is really great. Thank you so much, Sarah. This is awesome. I had a quick question. Didn't we know the need? Wasn't the number like 1,500 units a year or something to get ourselves out of the hole? Didn't we have that data at some point?
Sorry, what was the
Let
question?
Ann go.
I've seen older data sources. I've seen U of A had done a study long ago, given the exact need. We don't, I'm hoping Pima County does do this with their study they're coming. On our end, the only thing that we know is how many households are housing cost burdened, which is
Yeah.
not exactly the need. And so we've been hesitant to share a number because of that.
Why would that not correlate?
Because it's they can't afford to live where they're living. It doesn't necessarily mean a new unit needs to be created. So I don't feel like there's a one-to-one correlation there, but they're clearly related.
Okay. Did you have a question, Jim and Ann?
One clarification based on the sort of appreciated picking David's brain and thinking through the numbers that Sarah, that we were just sort of brainstorming. One clarification I saw, we can talk through Megan and David's comments in the chat. Our thinking on that was, yes, the Housing Trust Fund money supporting a 4% could be really helpful. I think on our end, should the discussion of a housing bond come to fruition, then I think we could, this was based on today's resources. If a housing bond moves forward, I think we could really revise those numbers quite a bit.
Can we go back to that first slide? We went through that pretty quick, and I don't know that I understood what was being shown there.
Hang on one second.
I tried to take a picture of it, but I didn't get the whole page in.
Sorry. I know we had people needing to leave at 5, so I just breezed through it. And of course, here we go. Is it this slide?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, so just in terms of identifying the current number of affordable housing units in Tucson. So we have the 1505, which is the bottom of the first column, sum of public housing.
those are public housing.
Okay,
All of these, the
those
public
are-
housing unit summary are all public housing units.
so those are owned by the city of Tucson. Is that
Correct.
okay? 1505. Okay. And then we've got the Section 8 vouchers, which is 5480.
Well, there's the housing choice vouchers are 4798. And then there's a Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing and Family Unification Program.
Okay, well, so if you look at the bottom right table, the sum of Section 8, so there's a
Oh, yeah, 4996.
4996, but then there's another total below that, the 5480. What's the difference between those?
So that's the county. And then this 4996 is just the city.
Okay, so we're gonna focus on the city here, correct?
Yep. So I put Tucson total. I added this line in here. And then this was all of the county. So that's exactly correct. Because outside of Tucson, it's this. I subtracted this line basically.
Okay, and then what is the third column again?
So the third column are like the affordable rental units. So most of the LIHTC projects.
So that'd be like HUD 202s would fall under that.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
happy to jump in here. Anything we knew had a subsidy and we're aware of, it doesn't necessarily mean it captured everything. So yes, if it was a 202, if it was a HUD assisted property, we would have captured it. But if a nonprofit or developer is charging below market rents and there's not a subsidy involved, we would not have captured it.
Okay, so if we add up the 1489, the 4996, the 4341, that's 10,826. So that we could say that is the number of affordable housing units currently within the city of Tucson limits. Is that accurate?
Yes, that we know of.
Ish.
Yeah.
Okay,
I say ish too, the voucher number fluctuates a little bit.
okay, so the second slide, so we know what's there right now. And the second slide, I think this was what we were trying to do here was identify the number of units that are at risk of falling out of the programs, right? So we think over the next 4 years, there's going to be almost 600 units that are at risk of falling out.
Can I break in here?
Yeah.
I mean, a 1993, remember that it's a 15-year compliance period, not a 30-year compliance period.
Right. I was going to that point too, but
So until a few years ago, when ADOH started basically requiring that in order to get 9% credits, you waive your right to a qualified contract, which then it became a 30-year compliance period. It's not 1993 projects that are terming out, and it is 2006, 2007, 2008 projects that are about to fall out. So
My apologies.
so it's a lot. It's not, I mean, this slide is highly misleading.
I will pull those different numbers from the spreadsheet. And that was one thing I talked to Ben about this and tried to get assistance, and we ended up going with this slide. But I'll share the spreadsheet that you can get from HUD that shows the, place and service dates for all of the LIHTC projects. And we can reassess and reevaluate this list.
I mean, this is all, I mean, it's much more dire than this, is my point.
And one just FYI there, Sarah, this was part of mayor and council materials. There is public info on that ADOH shared with us the projects who are currently going through the process. And so we have that data too.
Okay.
so Okay, and then the next slide basically was attempting to say what we think is typical for a year. And I guess I would, my personal feeling is I'd like to maybe do a stretch goal. If we think that 450 units is typical for a year, we've got 10,826 units currently that are going to be falling out of compliance either, after 15 years or 30 years. We could say on average, there's going to be, 600 units that fall out of compliance. So basically what we're saying here is we think there's 600 units that might be falling out of compliance per year. Or no,
No, it's not gonna be anywhere near that.
no, I'm sorry. It looks like 150 per year, but we could add 400. So that would be a net add of 300 per year is what this is saying.
I don't think, I'm not even sure I agree with the 150 because. A HUD 202, for example, isn't gonna fall out in the same way that a 9% LIHTC is. So I think 150 is probably overstating what you're gonna lose in any given year.
Yeah.
At the last CHD meeting, I brought up a few projects that are coming out of LIHTC in the next, I think, 2.5 years.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, LIHTC units are definitely more at risk.
Okay.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I had data up to specific projects in January 2025 that were coming out. That was the pressing one, I thought.
Well, I think, the 1 4% LIHTC project, I think the 2 9% is, I think that's based on where the 9% program is, that's a reasonable expectation. We beat that this year with 3.
Yeah.
But, if you look over the last 5 or 10 years, that's a reasonable expectation. I think where we need, I think the 1 4% is on the low side. I would think that we could probably get 2 or 3 of those a year, potentially. So, Tucson House might fall under that. GA Han is looking at a project.
Remember, the Tucson House is already affordable housing, so that's not a net gain.
That's true. La Frontera has I think, Jason, you guys have a couple of 4%. Is he still with us? And
Yeah, I'm still here.
yeah. So I think right now there's 5 or 6 4% projects that are potentially in the pipeline for Tucson. So I would suggest when we're going through this, we think about maybe more than 1 per year.
I don't disagree with that.
Maggie's had her hand up.
So going to the, the inventory, did you include the permanently affordable home ownership units in there? And just wondering, because I saw mostly City of Tucson projects.
Sarah, sorry, you're saying the goals?
No, for the existing inventory.
Oh, the inventory, again, we would have captured anything that had home funding if it was a home ownership project, anything that we were aware that had subsidy.
Well, yeah, so most of the good chunk of PCCLPs, permanently affordable home ownership units, are NSP funded.
Yeah, and so I think part of it too would be if you have any data that you could share, and anybody on this call, if you're aware of, an inventory that you don't think is captured in the map dashboard, send it my way for sure.
I will do that.
Thanks.
So, oh, go ahead, Ann, or Mary Ann.
I was just wondering if you feel like really comfortable with this information, can you send it to us? Or do you expect that you're going to be making some changes to this?
I'll probably make changes that are sort of specified through this discussion, but I will definitely share the PDF and we'll put it on the website and share it with all of the commission members.
Okay, thank you very much.
Megan has her hand up too.
Well, I appreciate hearing the conversation around the 4%. I mean, I think the challenge has been that it has been underutilized and there's reasons for that. And I do appreciate in the chats, like I think that there's a couple comments that address sort of why there's potential for that to be greater. But as a point of conversation for this group, I just wonder if there's more that needs to be sort of pushed or advocated for that truly to become successful. I know even like the project, well, and I think for this purpose, we're talking more in the city, correct, and not Pima County, or is it looking at sort of as a whole for the numbers, for the projection numbers? Sarah, do you know?
Well, I know that what the county's working on, right, is a countywide snapshot, but they're also attempting to work with each jurisdiction
Right.
individually.
But this 450 in particular is city.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
kind of just thinking about city for ourselves. And so,
Okay.
and then I think for when the county starts working on their scope and their project for getting their dashboard up, us paying attention to it. And if there's things that we want to change and make sure we get out of it, kind of chiming in and asking for that while we're at those meetings. You know, Shay and Megan and David, and then, you know, making sure that we're bringing whatever comes up in these meetings and the full commission to kind of make sure that they're going back and forth and we're, you know, getting what we want out of that larger county study. But, you know, if there are areas that we're lacking, to kind of make sure that we're aware of it and figure out a way to cover that.
Okay. And just to that point, I mean, I think that there is a big enough shift that the 4% can be viable, but I would, you know, ask, I think that's one of the opportunities is that 4% has been significantly underutilized. And so making sure that that really is sort of an opportunity in the community. And even I think the Marana project, they're really sort of struggling to really make that work, even though I think they're committed. So thank you.
Marcos has his hand up. Go ahead, Marcos.
Thank you. So like for the 4% projects, on Megan's point, I think we do need to look at what we can do to support those projects if we want to start seeing more of them. I think we need to have more local resources available, like, you know, general funds that the county has allocated, although I am a little bit disappointed that our county review committee did not offer some type of funding support to the 2 light tech projects that applied for our funding, but that's something that I know we're going to be working on moving forward. But it was encouraging that I think that we're going to have another 5 million, and the funds that were not allocated from the current budget will roll over. So we'll be doing another RFP. The new funding takes effect July 1st. So I know we're going to be, you know, I'm going to be pushing for the county to get the next RFP released as soon as possible, so that hopefully we can work with the projects that didn't score and maybe, you know, help them achieve a successful application in our next round of funding. And, you know, our funds, you know, can be utilized across the county, including in the city and the other jurisdictions. We did support 2 4% projects with the recent RFP. Both were in progress. And so I'm glad that we were able to assist those projects so that they can move towards completion. But I think we need to have more, of this localized support in place and ready to help prioritize, funding for projects that need it the most, like the 4% projects. As well as, I'm also pushing for other types of assistance. But with regards to the rental developments, I think the 4% projects do need more support. I think we're going to see potentially a slowdown in that area with regards to the regional banking crises. The bank that failed in California was into the light tech market. And I don't know, David, I could be off a little bit, maybe affecting other states like California more than Arizona, but there could be, and then also with the higher interest rates, I'm not sure how that's gonna, the 4% market relies more heavily on the mortgage to fill their, to meet their costs. So I think that's another area of concern. So anyway, that's fine. And as Megan mentioned, we're working on building out our dashboard, and we'll continue to be meeting with the other jurisdictions and to see if we can help toward each jurisdiction reach their goals. So hope that helps.
Now, if I could just jump on here, just to piggyback on what Marco said, I think, at the state level, we have a governor now who is willing to invest in affordable housing. The previous administration really did not think that government should be involved in this. And so there's now $150 million in the State Housing Trust Fund. They're going to continue to expand, from what I'm hearing, the state tax credit program. So, those things are all going to help the 4% projects as well.
This is the first and last time I will ever say anything good about Doug Ducey. But he was pushing the 4%, the state tax credit. So it's not like he did nothing. And that's the last good thing I will ever say about Doug Ducey.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Just one comment. We've worked on 4% deals over the last 3 years, all here in Tucson. We did the Center of Hope. We're doing the Cascade Apartments, and then we're doing Sleepy Hollow. Currently, those are all 4% structures. 2 of them are 9% that ended up failing, and then we recycled back into the 4% round. But it's not a complicated answer. I mean, when you have a 4% deal, you have an equity. You have a gap. You go from having 9% credits to 4% credits. It just doesn't take a math genius to figure that out. You need significant soft layers to fill, or you need significant contribution from your developer. And in these scenarios, we had 9 layers on Center of Hope. We had, county, city, we had LISC, we had Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago. We had all kinds of sources to make that project work, which was a homeless project. But Sleepy Hollow, that's a very small project. 44 units was supposed to be 68. And we have, a significant gap that's being filled by the state and with help from the city. And then Cascade has a significant contribution from the developer to fill the gap themselves. And we sold the land to Dominion, who's doing the 4% up in Marana. I've had several conversations with Owen Metz. We carried that land for him for almost 1.5 years, so he could try to put his deal together. And I could, and these are guys that buy their own credits, issue their own debt, buy their own bonds. These are a self-functioning entity, fully integrated, and they're having a tough time putting these things together. So the short answer is money. If you want If you want more 4% deals and the 9% lose,
Mhm.
you basically have, a 40% of that deal has to be gapped. I mean, you got to fill it, and it's not going to be filled with happy thoughts and technical assistance meetings. Trust me, I've tried. That they don't work. They're filled with money. So if we want to commit to creating more 4% units, it all comes down to a financial commitment to help those developers and those projects fill those gaps.
I agree. So, and that just drives home the point I was trying to make, which is it takes every level working together to do it. But I think there's more goodwill now towards it than what I've seen the last, 5 or 10 years. So, going back to the question in hand, because I know we're getting tight on time. There's two decisions we need to make. I think first is, when do we want to set a deadline? I was thinking maybe a 5-year goal, so 2028. And then if we know that currently there's 10,826 affordable units, what's a reasonable, what's a goal? What's a stretch goal for us to set for the city of Tucson? Is it 500 more units a year, 500 new additions, more units built than what is taken offline? If we did something like that, that would take us to 13,326. I guess that's the question I'd like.
Jim Freeze.
Yeah. That's just about to jump in.
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah, go ahead.
So if, I think Ann kind of grazed by it for a minute, but if we're talking about an affordable housing inventory goal, Ann mentioned 70% of our families our households are housing cost burden, right? Now we know that Tucson has 219,000 households. We know that 153,000 affordable units isn't what the goal is going to be, but I think it's an HCD question. What do we think is the number of units that would ensure housing affordability for most of Tucson's households?
Yeah, I have a similar question, Joe. I mean, I was wondering if maybe it makes sense to take, this is why we keep tabling, I feel like, this final number issue, because we still don't have full data. I don't feel that we have, it should be based on need, right? Like exactly what you're saying. The number should be based on some data about need, and we don't have that information currently, or a good enough picture of it. So I don't, for me personally, I'm not feeling pressured to finalize this number. But
And I'm gonna just chime in real quick and say that I think the housing needs assessment and target market analysis that the county have included in their data dashboard, it is intended to help address that need, right? Like the target market analysis and the housing needs assessment to really understand what the demographic, on the ground people need is. Because you're right, if we're talking at these levels of just numbers of doors, but like who lives in the doors? And I still think that that's something that needs to be connected. So we can reach out to the county too. And I don't know if it was talked about at the meeting last week. I don't think it was on the agenda, but we could ask for it to be on the next agenda and just see what the status is, and maybe see if we can get county folks to come talk to us at our next meeting as well on this scope. Because I think that housing needs assessment and target market analysis is sort of where that gap is for us to help us really hone in on this number.
And did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I appreciate what Sarah just said. So I feel uncomfortable guessing at that number and really want that to be informed. I think we know we know what based on, we have a good estimate of how many people are chronically homeless. So I feel like we have a decent idea of what we need in terms of permanent supportive housing I don't feel comfortable giving a number for true affordable housing that we need.
All right, I'm telling Jim to log in on his phone. But I think we should, can we move on to the
Well,
next?
can I just respond to what you said?
Yeah, oh, sorry, yes, David, go ahead.
I think it would be a huge mistake to base a production goal simply on an identified need if the resources aren't there to meet that goal, because you're just setting yourself up for failure. You've got to focus on what you are capable of doing with some reasonable stretch goals, but to say we need 15,000 units, so therefore our goal is 15,000 units. I mean, this is.
I'm not saying it would be a one-to-one correlation either. I don't.
Well,
But
I mean, my view is you have to base it on what's reasonably achievable, or else you're just gonna look like you're.
well, that's what the number we got today was that 400.
Yes, I agree with that. That I think that's the correct approach.
But if there's such a huge gap where what's being provided and what is actually needed, like which I'm pretty sure we all know it's in maybe potentially even hundreds, if not thousands of units, then you use that data to put political pressure to ask for the funding. Like that's why it's an important discussion to have, in my opinion.
Yeah, but you don't base, but you secure, you get a reasonable likelihood that that funding will be available before you then incorporate that into your production.
Absolutely. Yeah, but I still think having those two to compare to is needed to understand like how far, it's like any.
I agree with that, but
how
what I understood you to say was base the production goals on the need. That's what I understood you to say.
No, I think for me,
I'll
as
say
a
that.
commissioner, I would like more data. I mean, I just would like to understand the need better, like, before, like you say, we all know it's a pretty dire condition out there. I think having that understanding, and then when, because from the public's perspective, I feel like people are experiencing that need and feeling like people in our position aren't responding fast enough, to be perfectly honest. And it's not our fault, right? Like, I'm not saying it's anyone's fault, but like to at least address that and be real and honest about the numbers and the need. I think it's important. I think it's really important to acknowledge that, and also to acknowledge that there's a huge lack of resources. We have one federal program that funds any projects on any significant scale. That's not anyone's fault in the room. It's just the way it is, like you're saying, David, and I completely agree. But also, like, without this data, we can't put pressure on the legislature or other places to try to respond. I'm
not arguing with that at all. I agree with that. I just, either I misunderstood what you said, or well, I'll leave it at that, but I understood you saying something entirely different.
Okay.
No, if I may, I think Shay's taken a reasonable position between, I think a reasonable position is that our goals should be based on what we need. That seems perfectly logical to me, whether that's a short-term goal, long-term goal, what the span is, and what level of government and intervention and subsidy that comes from is an entire other discussion. But I think if you set a goal of we're going to add a LIHTC project or two every year, that's a failure. That's a failure because it doesn't meet the needs of our community. So kind of as much as we may agree on Doug Ducey, I have a counterpoint. I think that our needs really should inform setting a goal or a stretch goal or whatever you want to call it. Thanks.
You guys hear me okay?
Yeah, welcome
Yeah,
back.
thanks, Jim.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, we were just saying that we would like to have maybe the county present. I thought that was a great suggestion, have the county present next meeting to talk a little bit more about the need and that number.
And the scope of their study?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll work on that. I'll also clean up this PowerPoint and share it with everybody so that they have it. I'll clean up the terming out numbers and clarify that. And then, you know, we can kind of just add this to the next meeting so we can kind of continue discussing it as well. But I think we're getting closer and understanding what we need in order to get to what we all want. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Can we move on? I've got like 5 minutes, and then Jim, I'm planning on taking off early. Can you take over once I leave at 5?
Sure.
Thank you. The next on the list was the update on El Pueblo and HCD development projects.
Yeah, so I'm gonna share my screen one more time, and I just made a little tiny presentation. That,
Once-
oh, go ahead.
Just one, if Shay has to leave, I wonder about doing the tiny home discussion question mark. Just,
I
I
was
saw
wondering-
Shay's name on that.
Yeah, yeah,
If
that's
we
a good
can
point.
move those, I've
Okay.
got like maybe 10-15 minutes wiggle room, but
Yeah, we'll talk about that, and then Shay, I'll share my presentation with you so that you see it too, and it'll be online. Yeah, so for order of operations, so for the tiny home and container home discussion, you know, but the gentleman from Boxes of Hope came to the full commission meeting at the beginning of the month and spoke at call to the audience, and wanted to come back and give a full presentation on what they have. So there's a couple of elements to this. So the state, right, is now trying to sell the shipping containers that were put by the previous governor on the border wall. So they've all been since removed. And so there's an influx of shipping containers at the state level. And they've sort of announced that they're up for grabs, right? So every jurisdiction's had the ability to apply to get them. Also, companies have been able to apply. So since that got released, the HCD has been contacted by probably 3 or 4 different companies who are doing shipping container conversions and basically want to do that for the city if we get shipping containers from this larger thing. We haven't heard anything from the state. We've done all the things we're supposed to do to, like, you know, put our name in the hat, and, you know, we just haven't heard back. But because everybody knows about it, there's a lot of interest. And so we've seen interest in changing them into housing units. I've also been hearing a lot of interest in turning them into personal storage units as well. So there's, I think, the 2 hot markets for shipping container that used to be on the border wall are now housing or storage. I guess my question was, you know, when you want them to come talk to you, what is the goal that you're trying to get? I didn't want to just give one company the opportunity to, like, give themselves a pitch, whereas we know there's all these different ones as well. So just sort of wanted to know what you guys wanted out of that discussion. We also know that tiny homes are coming up a lot, and these shipping containers can also be called tiny homes. And so we have Corin here too, to kind of talk about sort of the future movement of that discussion as well. But wanted to just kind of get your thoughts and what you want to see and what you hope to learn, or, you know, just try to get your thoughts on how you want to approach it.
Go ahead, Marianne. I see your hand up.
So for me, I'm not interested in a sales pitch, which is what I felt like we got from that guy. I saw him at the TPCH meeting too. I am really interested in somebody who's got very good knowledge about what is happening in the country with tiny homes and how they can be used, that has no interest in or self-interest in you know, getting funds from the city and you know, building these, you know, my concern is that we really need, like, to have somebody who's got really good knowledge and not somebody who's got some information and wants to make a business out of this by helping people. So I just want to put that concern on the table because it, you know, a lot of people are jumping in on tiny homes. I mean, we're building tiny homes in Eloy. There's a lot of glom onto this, and I again, I'm not interested in hearing a sales pitch or somebody who has, you know, no educational knowledge to give us on what you can do with tiny homes and the real cost to them and what it's like to put the infrastructure in to be able to build those. You know, I want to be educated. I don't want to be sold to. And that's what I felt was going on with the gentleman who spoke to us, who also spoke at the TPCH annual meeting I was at. So that's just my concern, and that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you, Marianne. Jim, and then David, and then Corey.
So I agree with everything Marianne said, but for me, you know, I've looked at these types of projects before, both manufactured housing and, you know, I kind of see this as similar to manufactured housing. And, you know, every time we've gone through the analysis and looked at it, when you consider the entire cost, it usually doesn't come out being a cost savings. I mean, everybody thinks that you're doing stuff in a factory, but then there's shipping costs, all the site costs remain the same. And there's also, I think, the logistical challenges of if these things are built in a different county, how does the city approve them and ensure that things are done properly into code? And, you know, so what's the inspection process and the quality control? And I think when you consider the entire life cycle, so I guess I'd just like to see the economics of it, understand is it something that is truly a more cost-effective way of doing affordable housing, you know, given some of those challenges.
David, or sorry, were you done, Jim?
I just want to share my screen for a moment and show you something that you might find interesting. This is a project in Los Angeles. Every one of those things is a shipping container. That is a project for the homeless being built out of 75 or 100 shipping containers that are being stacked and combined to create permanent supportive housing for the homeless. Very interesting project, but vastly, hugely expensive. But then it's LA, so things in LA cost a boatload of money. But there are some very interesting things being done. So that's all I want to say.
Thanks, David. And then Corin and Marianne.
Yeah, just want to say that obviously this is a really hot topic. I think there's a lot of interest in the community in terms of what can be more cost-effective ways of constructing housing, and not just housing, but also shelter use and a whole variety of things. So what we're doing at PDSC, a lot of questions have come up in terms of like, how do these fit in zoning? What are the building codes that apply? And that came up at the last meeting, the last full commission meeting as well. So what we're trying to do is just kind of lay out what some of the different ways that tiny houses can be used and classified per zoning are, because a tiny house is really just a construction method. And even that can mean so many different things. We're seeing tiny house used to refer to an actual house that has a kitchen and bathroom, like a kind of like an ADU style house. We're also hearing tiny house for things that are actually much more like, you know, don't have a kitchen, don't have a bathroom. They're really just like a very temporary shelter type use. So we're hearing tiny house for a lot of different things. And I think what we'd like to do is put together some of those different variations on tiny house. And then also how those tiny houses are arranged and operated also plays into then how we look at it for zoning. You know, we see places where tiny houses are being used as permanent housing, like a low-cost homeownership opportunity. That's what Flagstaff is doing with Habitat for Humanity, for example. We also see tiny houses being used more as a shelter use in a lot of cities. So those are wildly different uses from a zoning perspective, but also from a perspective of like, what are the housing goals we're trying to accomplish? So those are some of the zoning issues. Of course, there's building code. If you're also talking about manufactured housing, like you were bringing up, Jim, yeah, if it's not going through local building code review and inspection, then it needs to have a state certification. So some of those manufactured housing units have that. And I think some of the folks looking at rehabbing containers are planning to get the state certification, but that distinction is really important. So we're putting together some information on this kind of the spectrum of tiny houses, and based on the models we've seen, people refer to and bring up to us as potential options for Tucson. So we hope to bring that back to the commission later, probably not the July meeting, but August probably. And also we understand mayor and council may be requesting a study session on this even earlier. So stay tuned, and we'll try to provide some of the information to lay a bit of a foundation in terms of how these terms are used and what some of the opportunities might be with tiny houses.
I'll also chime in real quick and sort of like what Jim was mentioning about one of the companies that has reached out to us has mentioned that they've gotten the state licensure for manufactured homes. So, you know, as far as like that level, we're seeing them getting that as well. So, you know, that it would sort of fall under the classification that any other manufactured home would have to follow, getting certified by the state, et cetera. So I'm sure there are some that are just plopping them down and maybe not doing that, but you know, that would be a part of what we would be sure to look at as well. So just another thought. I have met with one company that has said that they have that certification as well. So definitely all ties in stuff to think about.
Yeah, I really appreciate your comments, Marianne. Similar, I don't want a sales page, but I am curious if someone is like really close to getting ready to set up shop and, you know, and they have all the numbers crunched and they can like talk to us about their process as far as prefab or, you know, just again, the construction costs, like that to me would be could be helpful. But Sarah, I don't know of the people you've talked to, is anyone that far down the road where they're basically ready to open doors and start selling tomorrow? Like how close does it seem that people are?
And I can kind of work on that and sort of see if any of these groups, the feeling I get is most of them are just like really kind of kicking off and haven't, other than like you know, there's places out there that have done it, like what David showed and other, you know, we see it happening. But I think as far as Arizona, I think Phoenix just did something with shipping containers and tiny homes. So I can look to see who that was. I'll do a little more research. I honestly think most of this is the impetus coming out of that sort of state announcement, right? So it's just people trying to get on that bandwagon as fast as possible and get that piece, right? But I do agree that I think it's something we want to assess. But like Corin mentioned, there's a lot of code situations that come into play. You know, we have certain shipping container projects in Tucson, but most of them are commercial. I know of a couple homes, one-offs that have been built out of shipping containers, you know, so really trying to figure out the code side of it and also like who these companies are and how far along they are, I think are part of what we're going to be working on over the next few months.
Yeah, because to me that would be the most helpful if like we could, and then I loved everything you were saying, Corin. I think that those discussions, you know, obviously with ADUs and a lot of the work that I do, I also am basically building some of these tiny homes too. And in the code, from the code perspective, it's anything under 400 square feet is considered a tiny home. And it doesn't really specify whether it's on, it could be on wheels, it could have a foundation, you know, it seems pretty loose. So I don't, but for me, like, I know there's a ton of interest in this and I get asked by community members all the time, how do we make this type of housing happen easier and faster? And so for me, that would be more my interest on a policy level, you know, and to have some of that, you know, from you, Corin, and see what could be done. But I think that's what would be the most helpful if we brought somebody in, is like how, and even with some of these tiny, like folks who are going through the process of trying to set up shop here, like what are at a more policy level, like have more that focus, like what are the constraints or challenges, and could there be anything done locally to make it easier for some of these things to happen?
I wanted to ask, I know I brought this up at the CHD meeting, if anybody from the commission or the city has reached out to Mark Kerr at the University of Arizona about any of this. Maybe Corin's presentation will cover most of those things, but I've seen Mark give presentations, I think to the city about manufactured housing. He's got a BA in economics, his master's and PhD in geography, and he's at the U of A. He's kind of a local expert that I think we have on that. And if you're looking for somebody to have a discussion maybe about that without it being a sales pitch, you know, I think that's somebody who may be a candidate. So I'll bring him up again. Thanks.
Megan.
Can I just add real quick? I think the only piece that I think, Corin, you probably will likely cover this and within zoning, but I think one of the obstacles has been the land and where, you know, like finding sites that are actually viable sites for placement and that don't get enormous pushback. But so I think as the conversation goes, that would be a piece of like understanding that more.
Awesome. Well, we'll keep working on that as staff, and like, you know, internally we're meeting to kind of talk about it, make a plan. So you'll see it come up again, either at the full commission meeting or again here as well. And anytime we find information, we'll share it with you all as well.
All right, thanks. I'm gonna step out now. Jim, can you take over for the list? I think we have just a few more agenda items.
Sure.
And sorry to be a pain, but I think we only have 2 commissioners, right? If when Shay leaves,
No,
2
Maggie,
voting.
Maggie,
Or there should be
Mary-
3.
Marianne and me.
Marianne.
Marianne and Jim in terms
And
of
Maggie.
voting.
No, Jim's not voting. Marianne and Maggie and Jim are voting, so we still have 3.
And Maggie.
Right.
Okay, you're right. Sorry. Thank
That's
you.
okay, yeah. It used to be bad if we didn't, yeah, but we're good.
Okay, so we just got through agenda item number 5. Moving on to agenda item number 6 is the HCD updates. So Sarah, back to you.
Yes, well, we kind of changed the agenda, so update on El Pueblo and HCD development projects and HCD updates, so I'll just do both of them, and I'll try not to bore you all. I'll share my screen one more time. So this is just a couple months back. Betty had asked if we could give an update on our development arm activities and what we're working on. We're very busy, so I will just sort of quickly run over sort of our work that we're doing on the 7.4 of the HASP plan, which was advanced development on phase 1 sites. We created our, you know, El Pueblo Housing Development nonprofit. And my job on a daily basis is working through the projects that you see on the screen right now. So the big project that we're in deeply is the Milagro on Oracle, no-tell motel, low-income housing tax credit project. So our very first one as El Pueblo Housing Development, we're slated to close on that in July. And so definitely learning about the joys of closing, and thankful that David is helping us along. So David, thank you. And everybody thank David. And so, yeah, so we're really excited about that project and really happy to see it move over this last year. You'll be invited to a sort of groundbreaking in August in conjunction with the Arizona Department of Housing Forum, the ADOH Forum. That'll be at Star Pass, and it is on the sort of self-guided tour. So just keep that in mind. I'm working through our 2 home ownership projects in Dunbar Spring and Menlo Park. really making a lot of progress, even though it doesn't feel like it, but have a meeting with Planning and Development Services to sort out some of the development constraints, et cetera, on these sites, but those are moving forward. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 projects that are sort of all in a pre-development phase. South 10th, which is like an existing container maintenance Tucson water project located off of South 10th below 23rd Street. The Amazon Motel, we now officially own and are utilizing as a shelter for right now until we do rehab and turn it into permanent supportive housing. So that's a project that we're working on. Stone and Speedway, you've all heard that, or I think, I'm not sure if it was announced at the full commission, but we are purchasing all of the parcels at the Stone and Speedway corner. So that's a project that we're really excited about, especially as it ties in with Norte Sewer and yeah, just kind of the gateway to, I think, downtown. We also are the proud owners of the old Bum Steer lot. So all the longtime Tucson residents familiar with Bum Steer, we now own that parcel and are working through the pre-development and doing environmental studies, et cetera, on that site. And then Nights Inn, which is over, I believe, off of Craycroft, is a hotel, and we're using the money that we got from the state. We purchased it, and we're doing a partnership with the county to do help them with their eviction prevention program. And then we're eventually going to move into shelter and permanent supportive housing as we advance that rehab. So there's a lot still kind of boiling, and you know, we're daydreaming and thinking of more projects to do. So the development arm is small but mighty, and just wanted to give you all an update on that and answer any questions if there are any regarding it. And hearing none, as far as any other HCD updates, Anne, is there anything that you want to mention that I missed?
I would just want to introduce Lena, and she's not expecting this, so don't feel like you have to go on camera, but Lena is now part of our HCD team. She is working on, she'll be doing GIS data analysis, and she's also a planner, so we'll also be helping Sarah with a lot of these affordable housing projects that Sarah just talked about. So super grateful to have a new staff member. Sorry to other people on this call. Okay.
Mary Ann?
Yeah, this was nice. Thank you. And is all this development under the nonprofit that the city has set up?
Some of it is, and some of it isn't. But it's sort of the nonprofit, in a sense, is supporting the development arm. So we have kind of two facets. Like we have planning and community development, which is an existing, you know, Pete Lee has been our sort of project manager for a lot of capital improvement projects. And so some of the like rehabs are falling more under sort of our existing development capacity in HCD. But the No-Tell Motel, Milagro and Oracle, the Dunbar Spring and Menlo Park are co-development, anything, and those are all EPHD, the new nonprofit. So I think we'll try to use the nonprofit. And the point of setting that up was so that we could apply for LIHTC, we could go for funding that we couldn't normally get otherwise. And so when we need it, we use it for that. And then for certain projects, we kind of keep it inside of our planning and community development, sort of development arm of the city.
One of the things thank you. One of the things that you said was that you're helping one of these projects. I think it was the No-Tell Motel. You're helping the county with eviction prevention. What does that mean?
So it's the Nights Inn project that that was over on Craycroft, and I might ask Anne to chime in that it's a partnership that we're working with them on.
Yeah, so Nights Inn, we are in the process of purchasing. We don't own it yet, but the hope, we are working, and Marcos is here. We're working closely with some of the folks at the county to we hope that it will work out to support their emergency eviction legal services program. So the goal would be to help folks who are getting evicted, who need a place to stay as part of their existing program. So we are trying to work with them to get an IGA in place, but our goal would be to support that program as long as we can. So that's our hope and dream for that site right now.
Well, that's nice. Thank you.
And any other updates or questions or anything? Awesome.
Okay, we'll move to agenda item number 7, which is the next meeting. Our general CEHD meeting will be on July 6th. The next affordable housing subcommittee meeting is July 19th. Are there any requests for agenda items from the commissioners?
Other than all that's been stated before, I'll make sure we have sort of updates on all the things that we're working on, and I think the inventory will be on it again. But if you think of something in the meantime, let me know.
Yeah, just send us an email. Okay, and with that, everybody, we are adjourned. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.